several issues here which we want to ensure. And I think just to frame this again, we also think, as it was mentioned earlier, that the global aspect of this is very important. So global standards are important. Also, achieving the widest possible global harmonization of spectrum are important. We've worked with the RSPG, and we are working with the RSPG, and you've already heard all about that from Philip, and we're very content with the work that's being done in the RSPG on the issue of 5G, and we look forward to receiving the opinion that that is coming out of the RSPG on 5G. That is something that is going to be an important element in terms of the pioneer bands and also further issues which will be dealt with in a second tier to the 5G opinion. The second tier will cover the full set of bands, which we want to have clarity on in Europe in 2017, and also the technical usage options. In this context, we are discussing in the Radio Spectrum Committee a mandate to the CEPT, and also here it's important to ensure that we get an early start of the issues that will be necessary to discuss in terms of technical conditions for the use of the spectrum. So this is something that we are working on with the member states at the moment, and we hope that possibly by the end of the year or early next year we will be able to come to a clear guidance in terms of the mandate that we see from the Commission as important elements that should be taken into account in the discussions on 5G. You also see here that we want to look into the backhauling. Very important if you're looking at all these data rates of how to ensure that you can get the backhaul straight in terms of handling the capacity that we are talking about in terms of 5G. And also we want to look at best practice for cost reduction and leveraging the code in terms of general authorizations. The last point is also important because we've heard that it's not only going to be about the dedicated bands that we already have available today for 5G, but 5G will be a diverse set of requirements. And in these diverse set of requirements, we will also need multiple bands with different regulatory models behind them. So primary dedicated licensed spectrum, licensed shared access or unlicensed bands, all of these will be important. So it's important to look into various forms of shared spectrum use so that we have a toolbox of different sharing enablers which we believe will be required in terms of 5G. So this is an element which is a, let's say, important one, and where we also want to work towards a recommended approach for authorization of specific 5G spectrum bands together with the member states. In summary, this is how we see and how we hope things will develop in terms of the 5G action plan. This is the timeline. So we already have work beginning, and a lot of that from now, basically, with 2017, 2018. You see a number of elements that we want to ensure are moved forward in this time scale so that in 2020 we can have a common target for 5G launched in all the member states, and as you can see, by 2025 having 5G everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Any question? Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Espen Sletta. I'm from the Norwegian Communication Authorities. I was just wondering, on one side, the Commission is promoting the Wi-Fi for EU, which basically is free Wi-Fi for the public citizens in city centers and public areas. On the other side, you're promoting 5G action plan, where private investment should build 5G for everyone. Do you see any conflict in that?
No, in the sense that these are elements which are important already today. How much traffic is offloaded onto Wi-Fi when we're speaking here or working? These are important elements already today which we're using in the context of mobile devices, and they are Wi-Fi enabled. They also enable the network technologies. So this is definitely an element also in terms of the standardization. I think there's a lot more integration coming up in terms of having not only the 5G technology, or let's say the normal mobile technologies, but also the Wi-Fi capabilities. So we see this as going hand in hand, and also part of what I was mentioning on one of my last slides about having dedicated spectrum, but also unlicensed spectrum, which will need to be used in order to ensure that we have this more dense cellular network.
Thank you. A second question there, yes, please.
Hi, Dean Bubley from Disruptive Analysis. Your slide with the various verticals, is your expectation at this stage that 5G services in those industries will almost always be moderated and provided by a traditional cellular operator as part of the value chain? Or do you expect the automotive and health companies to run and manage their own spectrum and services?
I think that's a good question, in the sense that in the future, we will have to see many industries working together. I don't think that there's one industry that can do it all. We already see this in the context of the automotive sector working together with the telecom sector in order to look into automated driving. I think this is a key cooperation that is necessary in order to ensure that all the elements are on board and also taken care of. And I think the same way that the car industry is cooperating with the telecoms industry, I think also these other sectors need to be looked at. So I don't think there's going to be maybe like one big network which will be able to cover it all, but there will be elements that need to be addressed depending on the specific use case. And there may be short-range devices which work as part of that network. There may be, in the Internet of Things, many possibilities. However, bringing all of this together and also ensuring that in some way in the network levels these elements are brought together, I think that's a big challenge for 5G. That, of course, means that there may be different requirements and needs on the types of spectrum that we have to address because of the different needs and requirements of these different types of use cases.
Thank you. If I may add another element, which is that 5G technology and 5G mobile networks are two different things. So that may not be equalized on all for all sectors. Any further question? Maybe a last one? Okay. Thanks a lot, Andreas. Could we jump directly to the session A, where we will try to present the current CEPT activities on 5G with a presentation from the chairman of ECC PT1, Steve Kühn from Ofcom, and a presentation of the CPG activities, so preparation of WRC19, by Alexander Kühn, the CPG chair. So starting with Steve Kühn, ECC PT1 chair, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the new incoming chairman of ECC PT1. I've had my first meeting as chair of the group just recently in September, but I've been a regular participant for quite a few years now, and PT1 itself has been going for quite a while. Just a bit of background, then PT1 is the lead group in CEPT for mobile broadband issues. along with its predecessor, it's been going since about 1997, and it's been involved in the IMT issues for all of that time. So it's worked alongside the ITU groups that have been developing IMT 2000, IMT Advanced, and IMT 2020, and it's contributed to that, as well as looking at the European requirements and, for example, the harmonisation of spectrum in Europe, looking at the sharing compatibility studies that are required, both for elements that are feeding into WRC processes, but also elements that are required in Europe. So in the past over 15 years, we've contributed to WRC 2000 at 03. We've also contributed to CEPT positions going into the WRC 07, and most recently we were instrumental alongside the CPG-PTD group in developing the analysis on issues going towards the WRC 15, Agenda Item 1.1, and now we've got the task to work on 1.13 to look at the bands there and what we think Europe needs for those 5G bands. Alongside those, we've also been given the task of looking at some other related agenda items, which is 911, 912 and 918. So those deal with spectrum at 2 gigahertz, where you've got IMT and terrestrial and satellite components trying to live together. 912, which is a follow-up to the allocation or the identification at the last WRC in L band, and 918, which is looking at the machine-to-machine and Internet of Things aspects. So we've been constantly looking towards the future of mobile and what it needs from a European perspective in PT1. So looking at the work that we've got with a focus on the WRC, it breaks down neatly into four main areas. So we've got the sharing and compatibility studies for the bands in Resolution 238. So 238 sets out the set of bands that the last WRC decided were going to be included in the studies for Agenda Item 1.13. So it's a range of bands from that we're familiar with, from around 24 gigahertz up to 86 gigahertz. So there's some of those bands, as we saw earlier, which have a mobile allocation already in there. Some of them don't, and we need to look at what sharing and compatibility studies are needed as part of the work towards looking at what the implications of introducing 5G services would be. We're also looking at inputs to Working Party 5D on parameters and spectrum needs. PT1 has this role of being the lead group in CEPT for coordinating work into 5G. So particularly this year, as Working Party 5D has that remit to come up with elements on spectrum needs and technical parameters for the 1.13 process, we're taking a critical look at what's being fed into that and seeing whether, from a European perspective, we need to comment on that or propose modifications to that. Looking slightly further ahead, we'll be wanting to coordinate CEPT inputs into TG51. This will be the ITU group that has the main responsibility for preparation of the sharing studies and CPM text on this agenda item. So again, because of our role that's been given to us by CPG on 1.13, we will be coordinating European positions in terms of when we're at the meetings, the European line into that task group, and also developing coordinated European inputs based on the studies that we'll be doing the technical analysis on the sharing and compatibility. So this is the way that Europe will coordinate its view, and it gives us the opportunity to do a lot of detailed technical work in between the task group meetings, and then to present that and discuss that with the other regions. And alongside all that, we've got a technology track which is looking at the 5G emerging technologies that are being worked on through the Working Party 5D process towards a definition of IMT 2020 and what those technologies will actually look like. And alongside all of that, as a kind of ongoing process, we developed the draft CEPT brief. So this starts out as an initial kind of set of aims of what we want through the process, and it develops throughout that process towards a position for the WRC in 2019. So that's not all. As well as the work that's focused on the 1.13 elements, we've also got a whole series of other 5G related elements that we're working on. So first of those, we're looking already at the technical conditions that apply in the 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz band. So we're looking at what we've got in the ECC decision at the moment, and whether that's applicable or whether it's a barrier to introduction of 5G in that band. We're also looking at a follow-up to the outcome of the last WRC, where spectrum at 1427 to 1452 and 1492 to 1518 was identified for IMT. So this sits alongside the band that's already harmonised in Europe for supplemental downlink applications, and expands that by a significant amount. So we've got to look at how we're actually going to make use of that. What's the best way to make use of that in CEPT, and how we promote that as a global band plan for the use of IMT. At the same time, we're also looking at the boundary at 1518, where we've got the boundary between the new IMT identification and the existing use for the mobile satellite service above 1518. And a key question for us is how do we enable coexistence between those two services, so that there's opportunities for both services to operate and to provide services to the consumers across Europe, and for consumers to use those services without suffering detriment or interference in particular areas. One important thing for us, for all mobile services, is becoming indoor coverage, and consumers want to use their terminals indoors, and they're finding in some places that is not as easy as they would want it to be. We're just starting out on a task to build up a knowledge of best practices across Europe on how to improve and provide ways for improving indoor coverage. So it's a task that we're just starting out of, and we're in the information gathering phase at the moment. But we're hoping that will lead to a useful knowledge base on options to improve indoor coverage. And finally, the mobile-to-mobile Internet of Things via mobile networks. Obviously, as we've heard already, IoT can be provided in a number of ways, and one of those is through mobile networks. So what we're having a look at the moment is is there anything that's an impediment or a barrier in the regulations that would prevent use of the mobile spectrum for IoT machine-to-machine type communications? And if there is a barrier, is that justified? Is it necessary, or do we need to make adjustments to remove the barrier? So there's a big challenge for us right now. We need to get the studies for Agenda Item 1.13 underway as soon as possible. It feels like time is running out. Looking at the calendar, we're nearly at the end of 2016, so nearly into 2017, and we've got the second session of the CPM due in February 2019. And you work back from that, and you find out that the draft text for the CPM, which is supposed to summarise all of the technical work, all the coexistence, compatibility and sharing studies that have been done, and the conclusions and the options for action, that's all going to be completed, at least in draft form, ready for September 2018. So in terms of our European preparations, this gives us only 6 scheduled meetings of ECC PT1. Now we've planned our meetings as far as possible to align with the ITU Task Group 5.1 schedule, so that we can do our technical work and submit contributions and have those discussed in the ITU arena, and of course then we'll take back our the results of that discussion and our excuse me, and the feedback that we've had, and further develop our technical work. But some of those parameters will not be available before before March 2017. Sorry for that. Part of the problem, though, is that some of the parameters will not be available before March next year. So although we've had a couple of meetings since the start of the process, it's been very difficult for us to start work on the technical analysis. So you can see on the calendar there we've got the deadline for parameters early in 2017. Then we've got a set of meetings, only 5 meetings before the draft CPM text is due. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to work on on those technical studies. We also need to take account of the work in RSPG. So RSPG's highlighted 5 frequency bands. So there's the 3.4 to 3.8 that I already mentioned. This, in the draft opinion, the RSPG said this was a primary band suitable for the introduction of 5G even before 2020. So, as I said, we've already started work on this, and we're in communication with 3GPP to find out what they understand about what 5G might look like in this band. The draft opinion also mentioned 700 as because it will need to be deployed in bands already harmonised, looking at nationwide and indoor 5G coverage. And then, of course, the the RSPG mentioned the 3 bands above 6 gigahertz at 26, 32 and 40 gigahertz. So we can move forward immediately already on 3.4 to 3.8. And as I say, we're already looking at whether the technical conditions are suitable for deployment of 5G. So the band is already designated across Europe for MFCN, that's mobile and fixed communication networks. This has already up to 400 megahertz of continuous spectrum, which enables pretty wide channel bandwidths. But looking at it, the first thing we've noticed is that there is a fragmentation of different national and regional authorizations. So in many countries, different parts of the band are available. Some parts are not available. It's very rare that you find a country where the whole 400 megahertz is already available. And we need to know what 5G would look like in this band, so we can make an assessment of whether our technical parameters are suitable or not. So as I say, we've asked 3GPP for information on the technical parameters, and we're hoping to hear back from them pretty soon, so that we can start our work on that. And we've got a fairly early deadline for that, November 2017, that we expect to report back to ECC on that. The next question is what work is needed in 700 megahertz. So we harmonised the 694 to 790 megahertz band for mobile fixed communication networks in 2015 in CEPT, and we did that on the basis of a 2 times 30 paired spectrum arrangement, which was aligned with the lower part of 3GPP band 28, and it was done on the basis of technology neutrality. So you can see the band plan there. The question for us is, what would 5G in 700 megahertz look like? Can it work in that band plan? Can it work with those set of technical conditions? Is there anything specific that we need to do at the PT1 level on that? And we can also start to think about 26 gigahertz. So this band's already included in resolution 238. So it's one of the bands on our list for study under 1.13. We note that there's a global mobile allocation from 25.25 to 27.5. So it's not a simple picture, because the lower part of that band it has a mobile allocation in region 3, but not in the other 2 regions. And one of the first tasks for us is to look at how 5G can share with the other services in this frequency band. So I've listed some of the main ones there: the data relay satellites, the Earth exploration, data downlink Earth stations. There's some parts of the spectrum the fixed satellite service is operating, and there are adjacent band passive services that we need to think about. And alongside all of this, we can't forget our work on 1.13. So we've got that list of bands to study. There's about 33 gigahertz in total of spectrum that needs to be studied. A whole variety of different radio services to look at. There's some commonality between some parts of some of the bands, but there are still quite a lot of elements to study. And as part of our work to produce the CEPT brief, we've got to develop a view on every one of those bands in time for the WRC, and work out what our priorities at the WRC are going to be, what action we think needs to be taken. I think we're ready for the challenge in PT1. Despite all the talk of prioritisation, our work is driven by contributions. So we will deal with all the contributions, and the way that members can prioritise it is by putting in technical contributions on specific bands. So, as I said, because we don't have the parameters in great detail yet. But what we've been able to do is quite limited so far. But we're already getting contributions on technical matters related to the 5G bands. But the good thing about it is, although we only have those scheduled meetings, we can work in a very agile way. So we have a number of ways of working open to us. We can work by the ECO forum, we can do online meetings, we can even schedule dedicated face-to-face meetings on specific issues in between our meetings. So I think we can make rapid progress between the plenary meetings, and we've got a very good membership who's got a very good range of expertise, and it's always very well attended. So thank you for bearing with me through the coughing, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Steve, for this presentation. Any question? Yes, please, Eduardo.
Thank you, Eric. Eduardo Morelli, European Space Agency. I have a small comment and a question for you. The small comment is when you describe the services under 26 gigahertz, I noticed that you are not listing the space research service that's also located in the band. Since I noticed that the same mistake is in the draft EC mandate, I take the opportunity to raise this point. The second actually is a question, still relates to the 26 gigahertz and its relationship with the agenda item 114. It seems to be an issue that everybody tends to sweep under the carpet. Is there an intention to study compatibility between IMT 5G and HAPS in 26 gigahertz? Since at least in part of that, because there is an overlap in frequencies there. It looks like neither in CEPT nor in the ITUR anybody is willing to study that, and thinking that, okay, we'll fight it out at WRC. What is your view on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Well, first, apologies for the omission, and certainly I hope we don't forget to do it before the end of the process. In terms of the HAPS, I think we're guided in part by the useful table that was included in the first CPM report that highlights where there are the overlaps, and I think it is important that we don't get into the situation where we've studied access to the band assuming the absence of HAPS, and at the same time the HAPS people have studied access to the band assuming the absence of 5G. And I think it's going to be quite difficult, but one of the ways we can at least make sure that we don't forget about it is through coordination between the groups in CEPT, so that's between PT1 and the group dealing with HAPS, and between the individual coordinators. Good thing is they're both based in the UK, so it's very easy for them to coordinate. But I think that also then needs to translate into feedback to the groups about what that means in practice and what we need to assume when we're doing the studies. So you're right. It's an issue that we need to take very good care of, so that when we get to the conference, we are prepared for those different permutations that you might have.
Thank you. So I understand that this issue of apps versus IMT 2020 may come later in the preparatory process, both in ITU and in CEPT. And for space research, that's maybe how many stations in the world?
Not many, but we would still like to use them. Thank you.
Sure. Further question to Steve? Okay, so thanks a lot. It means that you think that the preparatory process in ECC PD1 for 5G is perfect. We don't have to change anything. That's correct? Thanks a lot. We will see for WRC preparation, and the next speaker is Alexander Kühn from BNetzA, who succeeded in leading the Europe in WRC 15 and will do the same for WRC 19. Alexander.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Also from my side, welcome to Mainz, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present here the CPG activities. You heard already one of the subgroup of CPG is quite active in the main agenda item 1.13 on 5G, but I would like to invite you now to have a look also in the other aspects regarding CPG. So what is CPG? It's the conference preparatory group towards WRC 19, and we are responsible for developing the European common proposals for this conference. So we are trying to merge at least everything and try to balance the interests. Well, one of these will definitely between these already mentioned agenda items 1.13 and 1.14, but there are many more. It's up to me as the chairman of the CPG. I'm assisted by two vice chairmen, and you probably know my secretary, Mr. Bukwitz, already at many meetings have seen him, and also his photographs. So be always be aware that he will take a bad picture of you. So what did we learn from the last conferences overall in this worldwide process of World Radio Communication Conferences? Of course, we've learned that every single ITU region, may it be the letters A, B, C, D, E, may it also be the numbers 1, 2, 3, be equally important. And we would like to find a balanced solution that we are always doing within spectrum management. And in particular, in the international spectrum management, this is very important. Because we've seen during the discussions at the last WRC on the famous agenda item 1.1, what tends to be the result of splitted views. We will have splitted results, and in the end we will have no result at all. And this is then not beneficial either to the industry nor the administrations, who put a lot of emphasis, efforts and money into a preparatory activity over the last years. So the ITU is always stressing that consensus is important, but this is essentially the point. The consensus leads to an acceptable result for everybody. And, well, we can make this nice trial here again. I've done that already on a national basis, but if I ask you that we would like to stop the meeting, have a coffee break right now, I'm quite sure that we will have a consensus. If I ask if you want to give some spectrum to 5G right now and maybe take away then some of this satellite part, then we will see a split view. So we have to balance the interests, and consensus is really there something where the people will not come back at a later WRC, so 4 years or even 8 years later, and asking again the same question. So we need to find something where people can work around. And what's the key to reach that? It's the continuous dialogue. And it's one of us, we are all humans. We would like to have the common understanding between our nice ideas, also of the caveats and the barriers. We need to identify as early as possible the difficulties. So thanks again, Eduardo, for mentioning the hubs issue here. And then also we have to identify the commonalities. And there are more than we believe in this WRC issue. And then we will come in the end to balanced solutions. And these balanced solutions can end up in a very, very tricky and easy way forward, because if we agree already before the WRC on some points, and we've done that for 2 agenda items at the last conference, then this balanced solution is just a fingertip at the first day of the conference. And that's easy. That's fine. Everybody is happy, and we can all go and have a drink somewhat later. If not, we will sit there in Geneva for 40 hours, 45 hours, and discussing the same issues again and again and again. This is something we should have always in mind when we are discussing. This balanced solutions is the essential part. What have we done with the first step within CPG? We've organized a very nice structure this time, because we already identified that we have many different interrelated agenda items at this conference. And therefore, we have now not only 4, we have 5 groups dealing with different subjects. And the main one has already been introduced by the chairman, Mr. Green, ECC PT1 dealing with the IMT 2020 matters, and some others as well. But there are some more as well. We have the satellite parts dealing with the non-GSO FSS regulatory environment in the 37 to 45 gigahertz range. We have to discuss also FSS in the 50 gigahertz range, which are also the bands in the relevant resolution, and we have to discuss also hubs. And CPG is then the group to bring all these interests together and balance and provide the right guidance to the other groups. I will not skip here PTD on the other side, but I will come to the specific groups again. So the WRC cycle, let's have a look. It's rather complex, and I'm still happy that the ITU is providing us with this nice little slides. We are going around, we're starting with CPM, the conference preparatory meeting. We are going through a study period in the study groups. Here for 5G study group 3, of course, we need to know how the propagation models are there. Then we need to see also the terrestrial services with all the different applications. And we have to have a look also at the satellite side. You have already heard that satellite is one key element here. And then we come to the CPM report. But then we have the main point. We have the ITU member states. And Mario was so kind to remind us all that we have 193 member states. Do we want to see 193 different proposals to the conference to solve just a single agenda item or just one single issue? No, and this is why we have these regional groups, to really concentrate there's something and bring together already some kind of groups. And then we can really come to the final acts in the end. But go forward, the international dimension. Here we have the different regional groups, 6 of them. Asia Pacific, we have the Arab Spectrum Management Group, we have the African Telecommunication Union, we have, of course, CEPT, CTEL, and the RCC. All of them are preparing more or less their views and positions towards the conference, and it's one way how we can really achieve this consensus before the conference. And I'm quite sure that you can agree with me that these are the essential groups in the part before the conference and towards the preparatory. And then we have later on also the possibility to go forward. So for 1.13, what it needs to be mentioned from CPG side. It's the consideration of an identification of frequency bands for the future development of international mobile telecommunications, INT. So we are putting the finger just on the top and say, hey, these bands are likely to be globally harmonized and please use them. And administrations make them available for the industry. This is a very soft way of regulation. On the other side, we are doing exactly the core business of each WRC. We are looking to possible additional allocations. And there we have already then a concentration, in particular on frequency bands, with the focus on frequency bands. Why this time on these frequency bands? Because we had these open agenda item for 1.1, and it was a very tough lessons learned that having an open agenda item, in particular with involving more or less all of the different radio communication services, will not lead to a very good result, because we can have then so many splitted views overall. So when we have seen already the list as the outcome of the WRC 15, but what was not on the list was something in the range between 6 gigahertz and maybe 8. It was discussed, but it was not found that it has a likelihood of global harmonization, and we have to bear that in mind. The other one, 10.4, 10.6, 200 megahertz, is this sufficient for 5G? Due to the discussion we had at that point in time that we need continuous spectrum of more than 1 gigahertz, it may not be the case, and that was the reason why this band was taken off the table again. 27.5, 29.5, a very intensively debated band at the conference and also after it. But also here, it was not found by WRC 15 that there is a likelihood for global harmonization. I will come back to that later on some of the aspects. Then we have 76, 81 gigahertz. Also here, we've just taken the decision at WRC 15 for radio location services. If you put this band now for the mobile community, it may create huge difficulties regarding the technological applicability in that band. So it was taken off the table. Yeah, and finally, 86 to 100. That was easy. No one made any proposal in that direction for the conference. So what do we have regarding the overlaps on the agenda? We have 113. We have already heard hubs. We have the eSIMs dealing with the same kind of spectrum. That's Earth stations in motion. So this is also a way of providing broadband to all the citizens. And we have the already mentioned non-GSO FSS, 3743 gigahertz, and these all needs to be balanced. And then we have the different issues under 9.1, 47 to 52, and then we have 3 minor items where we can see, okay, there is an interest of the mobile industry. So how we can deal with all these overlaps, I don't know yet. I need to see how the study results are, what are the real interests on that. It's maybe for 1.6 there is already a hint. It's dealing with the regulatory environment. So some clarity here can really work out to find the right balance in order to smooth already the sharing situation in that. That could be applicable also for 919. But in terms of studies, we need to work further and also be based on the contributions we will see there. Who are the stakeholders who are working with towards WRC 15? I mentioned all of them, and I'm quite sure, as far as I've seen, we will have the next meeting in December. All of them will be present at the next meeting as well, and we will take care of all of their interests as well and their views. So some notings from my side during this already very short term of preparation. However, we saw the first meeting of the TG51. We saw there already some difficulties to find a chairman for bands which are dealing with 5G interests above 50 gigahertz or 56 gigahertz. So this could be seen as a slightly sign that the interest is a little bit further down. Can we take already some tough decisions on that? Let's see. What do we have on the worldwide developments? We see that there is a constant concentration regarding trials, pilots, and all these stuff in the range around 25 to 40 gigahertz, which provides already an indication and some facts for us as well, and also provides some opportunities to make the sharing studies correct. Then we have the fixed service links, which are in the specific range between 25 and 40 gigahertz, are often used by mobile operators itself. So they can then decide later on if they want to keep this for access or they want to have this for backhauling if they need it. If we have fiber available, that's one issue. But if you do not have fiber available, how can you really ensure that the data which is produced on the access is really get away and be back forwarded in your own network? Then we have the satellite links, which are seen not always flexible in terms of the spectrum bands, because we cannot say, okay, we can take away this Earth station. It's not movable at all. And sometimes with regards to radio astronomy, even the spectrum is not movable at all. Then we have the administrations. Are they really keen to have or to create continuous agenda items? So we will have then the view to fixed backhaul and then back to mobile and again fixed backhaul and again mobile. I think we will reach more or less the end of this at the next conference and maybe then have a look at more efficient technologies in there. And then the main noting, we have already heard that, it's the globally harmonized bands, and they are essential for economies of scale. I think the higher the frequency will be, the higher the need of global harmonization will be, because we do not have the possibility to create very specific solutions for every single country, in that as the technological consequences are so severe and therefore the revenue process will not be very clear and we will not see any business cases in there. Yeah, and finally, even if we would like to do that and we fail to have these globally harmonized bands, of course you can take a national or regional decision and they can be complementary to the WRC process. But the core of the 5G development, at least from the point of view of CPG, will be around the WRC bands. So then some conclusions from our side at CPG and from my side in particular. The complexity of the agenda items, I highlighted this with the overlap, requires already some early agreements in on the commonalities to see really a positive result in the end. So we have to see what is necessary, what do the regional groups need, and what do they want to achieve at the conference, and this is something where we need to have some clarity at the earliest possible time. All bands under agenda item 1.13 will be studied, but we could have at least some focus. Some more focus also in the discussions, and this is then driven by the contributions towards the ITU, towards ECC PT1 and towards CPG itself as well. At first glance, you can take from the European perspective, good candidate bands can be 24, 25 to 27, 32 gigahertz, but also 40 to 43 gigahertz. And here finally, this is linked with the early commitment. The regional organizations have to commit themselves early to the process. And I'm already in a very good dialogue with all the other regional organizations to get the same kind of views in this on these specific points, and then come together and see how we can work there. And this is from this perspective my little presentation for you, and I hope you can now enjoy your coffee break. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Any question? Yes, please. Yeah, microphone or... Yeah.
It's exactly what you've said. The ESIM agenda item is dealing exactly with this 27.5 to 29.5, and it could be the case that you have an adjacent band difficulty. If this is not coming to the point in the overall environment, fine. If it comes to a problem, we need to take care, and that's the reason why I put it up front, not to miss any point in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Okay, if not, Philippe has mentioned that earlier this afternoon, that 5G is able to do everything, but you didn't imagine that 5G is able to make coffee. Yes. That's next door. Half an hour coffee break.